Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. Today we're talking about your intuition. How do you know when things are not right? What do you do about it? Do you just keep going, digging yourself further into a hole, or do you make those changes to stop those things from happening further? Adjust your attitude, adjust your lifestyle to help you. My guest today, Laura Day, does just that. She helps you, especially organizations and companies, she helps them to understand their intuition and how to manage it to make their business run effectively. But before I go into all of that, let me tell you a little bit about Laura. Laura has trained thousands of people and companies to use their brain, perceptions, and sixth sense in effective ways to realize their goals. She's an author of 6 best-selling books: Practical Intuition in Love, Practical Intuition in Success, The Circle, Welcome to Your Crisis, and How to Rule the World from Your Couch. Laura has been featured in publications that include Newsweek, New York Magazine, The Independent, Bottom Line, Cosmopolitan, Marie Claire, and many, many more, to name a few. As a best-selling author and world-renowned intuitive, Laura Day has spent 3 decades helping many organizations, individual and company, and the blue chip company to use their innate abilities to create profound changes in their path to success. Her work centers on the understanding, the myth on issues that are going around happening in our lives. I'm so excited to talk to Laura because I think so many things has happened. We've seen from the pandemic, we've seen from the way we handled pandemic, to understand how do we use our intuition to help us understand that no matter what is going on, there's always a better tomorrow. And even if tomorrow is not better, how can we use our intuition to stay calm and create a better tomorrow? Meet my wonderful guest, who I'm truly amazed to have this conversation with, Laura Day. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal, conversation with myself and Welsh. Have you ever thought about your intuition and how you can utilize that to make things happen in your life? Take away the pain, the suffering, because you felt it in your stomach. Well, my guest, as you all know, Laura Day, she's an author of 6 best-selling books. I've read all 6 of them, and I'm so excited and proudly can say this, that I've read all 6 of them because they're super amazing and they give you step-by-step guides on what to do if you have any doubt. She's here, she's joining me to talk about this and talk about how you could sense your intuition to guide yourself to a better place. Laura, how are you today?
Oh, so happy to be here. I am such a fan of how you really honor people's journeys, because but by the way, full disclosure, two New York Times bestsellers, 4 that did okay. But I think that there's a lot of very dangerous messaging out there, which is, oh, we're all fine, we're all happy, everything is perfect. And the reality is, and you and I work with some top celebrities who have these perfect lives. Everybody's pain hurts, and to make pain into shame is such an inauthentic way of being in community. So I really think your messaging is so important, because we're all works in progress. And often, as it has in both of our lives, a disability becomes an ability.
Yeah.
What we have to do to survive becomes ultimately, if it doesn't kill us, our superpower. But if it doesn't kill us is a big thing. And I think that that's what we're here to talk about. What are the tools that intuition gives us to make sure it doesn't kill us? And I have to say, I'm from a family of, I have a brother who's suicided, a mother who's suicided, a sister who's suicided, and one who basically doesn't function. So I'm pretty much the last survivor of my family. And the same disability that in many ways killed them, a combination of trauma and this intuitive brain, which is also known as an ADHD, very traumatized brain, that killed them, has made me an amazing life. And I think that, you suffer from a really devastating disease. And what the carrying that burden has made you force your voice forward in a way that carries others, and that is the archetype of the wounded healer. And we are all wounded healers, and the minute we take the shame out of pain and we can actually say, okay, this is the pain, it needs help, it needs research, it needs funding, it needs a little compassion, it needs skills. The minute that we can support where we are vulnerable, that's how superpowers are made.
I love that. You've just summarized it in a very positive way, because a lot of people always ask the pain, what is this pain? That's like I have to play this clip, what you've just said, because just we're all in different pain, everyone you meet. And I've started this conversation because I used to think it was just me when I had my chronic and was up in hospital. I used to feel bad about myself. I was like, why me? Why is it just me? And someone put reality into my head and said, and actually, look around, everyone is going through something. It might not be chronic illness pain, but they might be going through heartbreak pain, financial pain, any kind of situation, trolls on the internet pain. So you should think about your own pain and see how you could bring out the joy in yours rather than sit back and say, why me? So is that normalizing that conversation, which is something we always try to make so people feel more comfortable what they do. And I love what your work. And even before we get started, I have to ask you, Laura, who are you?
So most importantly, I am the mother of Samson Day. I have a 29-year-old who is my son and my light. I grew up in New York City. I was a math and science nerd, but I grew up in a very, really, really abusive household, compounded by the fact that we all have what they like to call now unique brains. And those certain abilities to move my attention very freely were really disabilities as a child, because I would know things that other people didn't know, but that does not make you popular at a third grade lunch table, especially when someone's forgotten to get you the uniform for gym, or you have 2 different color socks on, or no one packed you lunch, or, so you're weird compounded with weird. So I really, I grew up in New York City, and I grew up in a family of scientists, and in my early 20s, I became the subject of a group, and this is the early 80s here, so that dates me a tad. But at the time, the military and universities were really interested in extrasensory perception. So how can the human mind be fluid in time and space, tell the future, or view a location it's never seen by coordinates? How can this function of the human mind be useful? Mm-hmm. And so I came to intuition, psychic skills, through science, through being tested. And then what I used to like to call the world of weirdos descended on me, because one of the tests was televised, and I had an agreement that I was anonymous, and I was also very, very young, so it was ethical that I was anonymous. But they televised an experiment. I had kind of an instant following. I didn't even really have a name for it. I didn't know at 22 what, in popular language, a psychic was.
Yes.
So I ended up working mostly with science, with business, and with politics, with things that could be proven and disproven, and not what people would normally call a spirituality. Although I think one can argue, that a good belch is spiritual, that anything and everything is spiritual. If you believe we are spirit, then, a good fist fight's spiritual. Everything is spiritual. What we have a hard time doing is being humans. So I worked for many years, and I say work loosely. I was kind of passed around for many years, often to a lot of different companies and organizations. And then I got pregnant and left my husband, who I'd met literally as a child. I was 16, he was 17. I was pregnant, 32. And I thought, oh my God, I have to actually make a serious living. So this man who I had predicted the currency markets for every morning, just like as I was having my coffee, I said, I can't do this anymore. I've got to find a job. I've left my husband. I have a newborn. He said, are you kidding? I'll pay you, for the 5 minutes on the phone. And that's really how my career in a monetized way began in a big way. And then in another synchronicity, I was trying to figure out how I'd made such a royal mess of my life. And I was doing my own training on myself to just organize it, because intuition gives you a lot of information. It certainly doesn't give you the capacity to use it. And this woman sat next to me and said, what are you writing? And I said, oh, this is something I do with companies. I'm trying to do it on myself because I've just made a mess of my life. I'm in a play space. Our babies are eating sand, and I'm vomiting my life to this complete stranger in the way that only women do. And she said, well, let me see it. And I said, no, you wouldn't, I'm from a family of doctors. You couldn't even read my writing. She said, no, let me see it. And so finally I said, fine. And she looked at it and she said, wow, you have a bestseller here. And I said, oh, please, you don't have to be nice. And we're both, sipping our children's apple juice boxes. And she says, no, I'm a book agent. I will sell this for you.
No.
And so within, I don't know, 6 weeks, it was sold for one of the highest amounts ever paid for a first-time author. And within the year, I had made millions of dollars, and had a New York Times bestseller, and it sold a couple other books, and which was really, wonderful, because my wish was I wanted to be a full-time stay-at-home mother with my son, and intuition allowed me to. So intuition really is a skill that gives you the information you need. You still have to act on it. I still had to write the book. Yeah. I still had to, I'm a real introvert. So for me, even talking about my weirdness was a huge deal, because, when you're, and I mean, this with a chronic illness, when you're from a family of weird and crazy, the last thing you want to do is advertise you're weird and crazy. Yeah. When you have an infirmity, the last thing you want to do is advertise your other ones. You know what I'm saying? And so it was really, I remember the big therapeutic moment for me was they put my face on the cover of the first book. And I thought, I am never leaving my house again. Like, not only do they know me, do they know my name? Do they know I'm a weirdo? Is it public? But now, even if they don't know me, they can see me. And I really had to say, no, wait a sec. This is your blessing. Now, this is making you a living. This is allowing you to stay at home with your child. This is allowing a brain malformation to actually be a gift to others. And so I really began, it didn't happen immediately, began to embrace, okay, this is who I am. Perhaps it wouldn't have been who I would have picked had they given me a people catalog, but this is who I am. And this is what I can do with what it is I am.
That is, honestly, Laura, that is truly amazing, because I think it's a struggle I also go through. How do you utilize what your condition, whatever it is? And when people start saying good things about it, it's hard to take in. But you learned a very serious thing. You said you learned to harness the power of your intuition and make it work for you. I know you started talking about it. When did you really learn that, okay, this is my power, this is my gift, I need to learn to make this work for me?
I think that really being a test subject where my information was right or wrong. So in my early 20s, was the beginning. There's rarely one moment. Even falling in love. I met my husband. I can't say I fell in love for 2 years, and then I was devastatingly in love and still am. But I think that when I had to organize it, because before, what it was just a lot of very overwhelming information that was useful. I mean, it saved my life many times, led me to the right situations, but it was more of like eating too much of a really good meal and feeling sick. Uh, Whereas when all of a sudden I had a goal, it became useful. So I would say that having the kind of brain I did, the way it killed my siblings, it saved me. And it saved me because I was fortunate enough to be in a situation that organized it and applied it. So when you have something other people want, it helps you organize it because there are demands. The demands get overwhelming. And one of the things that I really loved is that I was able to, even not knowing somebody, and we can all do this. This is what I train people to do. We do this on Instagram every morning, but even not knowing someone, I was able to sit down with a complete stranger and say, oh, I have a feeling this is coming up for you. I have a feeling this happened for you a few years ago. You might want to remember this to help you out. And so I could immediately become a positively intimate part of somebody else's life or business. I mean, I work mostly with businesses because I'm not a licensed therapist. So I'm very careful working with people. I think you've got to be careful where you get your information. Whereas in a large company, I'm just one part of a process.
Yeah.
So I split my work. I train people to do this for one another in community. And how I make my living is that I predict the future for companies.
Before you just started becoming before you've written 6 books. Before you started that path, were there any particular books that you really enjoyed that gave you kind of direction, steered you into when you started your own writing skills?
Not really. I read the kind of books that you rip the cover off of if you're going to take public transportation because everyone will laugh at you, bodice rippers. But what really did help me was that I had so few boundaries, and I think that's true of many intuitives. You just kind of ease into everybody who's around you. That people, the taxi driver, the person who ran the deli, the old lady next door, people really were very much my teachers. And I think that a natural lack of boundaries, a natural wanting to help, helped me acquire the skills to help. I think, learned to heal just through being my own healer. I also love science. I mean, I went to a high school in New York that's only math and science. Basically, nobody can read, but everyone can do calculus, by freshman year. And I love things like the New England Journal of Medicine, and now I love PubMed. I love the studies on, for example, now we can see that the human brain responds to an image a computer hasn't even generated yet. So we can prove that our brains do tell the future. We can now prove telepathy because we can prove that two people who don't know each other, that if one person achieves a brain state and sends it to another who they've never met, that you can measure that their brain does the same thing. So I love science because I think the more we're realists, I mean, human life is magic. And the more you can embrace the realities, which does include the pain, it does include things like prejudice, does include things like infirmity, economics. The more you say this is reality, the more you can find the loopholes. And magic is all about loopholes, and that's really what intuition does. You set a goal, you have a target, and then you allow your attention to take you into those amazing loopholes. So, one of my best publicized predictions, which I made by accident, I really try not to make public predictions because what if I'm wrong and everybody follows me? So, but one of my most publicized ones was during the market crash. I think it was 2008 or 2009.
2008. I know that one. Yes.
And I because I have no boundaries on a radio show, said I just sold everything in my portfolio, and it was it was very helpful in life without being scary, but I would never have said that publicly, if it hadn't slipped, because even though it ended up being great PR when a couple of weeks later the market crashed, I would never have said that publicly because one of the reasons that I think there's so much doubt in everything is that anything done on planet Earth in the material world has a margin of error. That's just reality.
Yeah.
And also, just like we all have pain, we all have gifts. I spend a lot of time in LA, which I always tease is the land of somebodies and nobodies. There are no nobodies. And one of the great thing about intuition is someone sitting next to you who's, drunk out of their mind. You can just turn to them and flat out say, where are my keys? And if you can get them to answer without missing a beat, they will intuitively, in their mind's eye, be able to find your keys and give you the answer. So, we need to learn how to make use of each other. I know I've gone totally off topic. I'm making it up along now. So you're a Brit. You're not. You're polite. I'm a New Yorker. You have got to interrupt me if you want to get a word in here.
No, honestly, I was totally enjoying that conversation about the key and how you could just change someone's mind. But and one thing I would have to ask is about your book, How to Rule the World from Your Couch. Because in light of the pandemic, everyone is seeing what's happened. Everyone has to work from home. We have, no one has been able to go to the office to make that controlled feed where they see people. And you teach individuals, companies, how to create success in any ways by using their brain and unique and compelling ways. How has this pandemic shaped your book, what you've written in your book, How to Rule the World from Your Couch? How has it helped people going back to work?
Well, during the pandemic, one of the things that was wonderful is because we already had an online community, we had lots of resources. But it is, in a sense, working not in person is very much like the intuitive process. So one of the things, How to Rule the World from Your Couch, I have my copy here. How to Rule the World from Your Couch really breaks down intuitive skills. So, for example, it's really helpful to have a sense of the future, because in doing so, you can take appropriate actions in the present. So although, for example, my students often didn't see a pandemic coming, that would have been terrifying, and it would, your subconscious protects you from what is overwhelming. A lot of them prepared anyway in advance. Shifted their businesses in advance without knowing why they were doing it. Things like what we call body heat telepathy. So it's a form of remote healing, the ability to actually put your hand energetically on someone else's hand and steady them when you're making a point, even over Zoom, it really gives you a talent. These are all things everyone can try out for themselves. Try next time you're on a Zoom and you want to make a point, try, metaphorically, energetically, just experiencing yourself putting a settling hand on their arm. Notice how they respond. I mean, a lot of the difficulty with people in using these non-local skills, these psychic intuitive skills, is that because they don't know they exist, they don't employ them. And if you think about it, if you didn't know a door opened, you just walk by doors. You'd never try to open them and you'd never see all those other rooms. So How to Rule the World from Your Couch breaks down all of the intuitive skills like remote viewing, being able to see a location you've never been exposed to at a distance, telepathy, being able to send a convincing argument before you get on the call, and being able to find the voice that speaks in a language that will get a yes before you're making the sale or in the meeting. It really, all of intuition is either an information process or a connecting, a healing process. And I always yell at my students, I say, don't magicalize. They say, well, how do we manifest? I'm like, manifesting is just making something happen. Put water in a tray, put it in your ice box, you get ice, you've manifested ice. It's making something happen. And that is what we are made to do as human beings. But we tend to magicalize these skills that we think of as extraordinary, and we magicalize them out of being useful. It's very important to have a sense of the future because you need to change things in the present to make a better one. Just like it's very important to be able to, as we say in the US, walk a mile in someone else's moccasins, because you do need to be able to have many perspectives to be able to create a healthy life, but also to be able to choose who's in it. A lot of the things that I train people to do are, for example, they'll be to work as paraprofessionals. So for example, a doctor will have 3 medication choices to treat something, and an intuitive can run those choices through the patient and say to the doctor, this will happen with this one, this will happen with this one, this will be great in the beginning, but will lose effectiveness after 2 months. So you might want to, it's really helpful to be able to make, in a sense, a map of life without having to obsess about the map. And that's the downside of intuition.
Yes.
The downside of intuition is everyone wants to know what will happen. Hey, kids, make it happen. Yes, some of it, this was my point in the thing before that I totally forgot the point about. Some of it's beyond your field of control. So I couldn't change what the market was going to do in 08. I could only change my position in respect to it. And I did. I sold everything. There are a lot of things in life we cannot change. And often we obsess about trying to change them or predicting that they'll turn out the way we want. But much of life we can change. There's a lot of can do in the can't have or can't do. And when we pare things down and we say, okay, this is my sphere of influence. I wish this were there, but it's not. But this is my sphere of influence. What can I do here? So instead of predicting, which you can do with great accuracy, create, manifest.
I love that. Instead of predicting, create, manifest. And that is something a lot of us don't do. We always want the cons, things we can't reach. And there's so many things we can do, but we forget about that. We focus so much energy on the things we can't do. And that was
a lot of the time we can do the things we can't do. We just can't do them now.
Yeah, that's a level.
I mean, I think that I've seen a lot of, I will never forget, I was in my early 20s and I did this group called The Circle, and I actually wrote a book about the process decades later. But I would have a group of people who would come and I'd teach them the skill of using intuition to create what you wanted. Well, there was one really old lady. She was like in her late 40s, early 50s, ancient to my 23 or 4-year-old eyes. I'm now 62. So, and she wanted to be a dancer. And I was like, well, this lady needs better meds. Like that is never going to happen. But that was her new reality. And the rules of the group was you choose what you really want, and then you engage this process called The Circle in creating it. So that was what she did. fast forward 2 years later, she has created in New York City an expressive dance troupe. I think it was New York City, might have been Connecticut, but an expressive dance troupe that performs, that people come see, that she dances in, with, age range from 11 to probably the age I am now. She created it. She found the way, using intuition, using just going out in the world with a dream. She found a way to create it in a way that could have been created for her. So haha on me, who thought, oh, this woman's just bashing.
Yeah, having a laugh out there. You're a healer to the stars. I mean, you've done so many big celebrities out there. You've healed them and helping them understand their own intuition and do better. How were you able to utilize your method in helping individuals more particular in coping with the pandemics?
Well, more than anything, I created a community because, you take 100 people and there's enough for everyone. Everyone has something, everyone needs something. And I asked a lot of the celebrities to come on and inspire, because everyone, including them, everyone was stuck. And so we could all look at each other and say, well, yeah, I have a few $100 million and a gazillion people following. But by the way, I can't get toilet paper either. It was such a great equalizer. But so I really asked a lot of people to come on and inspire. And they did. One of the things that I really think that I helped the entertainment part of my groups with is finding ways to do their productions. So for example, Australia, knowing in advance that Australia would open for filming, or knowing in advance that a certain set would have a positive COVID on a certain day. A lot of what I do really for everybody is prediction. That is my special skill, and everybody has different ones. So a lot of it was really just saying, oh, okay, you've sold this show. This is when you'll be able to film it. This is what you can do in the meantime. This is how to hold on to your talent, your actor, and not lose them to another production. Oh my God, you're going to lose this one. You can replace here. A lot of it is moving chess pieces. That's a lot of what I do. I predict the future, and I prepare the board in the moment. So when the future hits, we're prepared. I did not predict the pandemic, because if I had seen the pandemic, I would have had a nervous breakdown. I did predict what happened in the market. So, I have 3 places I live, and I stocked them all with, actually it was 4 at the time because I was in London, with things like food and paper towel and toilet paper. So when the pandemic hit, even though I didn't know why I was doing it, I could tell people, oh, get my key from the super, go in, take anything you want. I'm in London. I don't need New York toilet paper. I don't need, you call it loo paper. What do you call it?
We call it toilet paper. Yeah, we call it toilet paper as well.
I was prepared, and my clients were prepared, because my clients are used to noticing without panic. If you're panicking, it's not intuition, because your subconscious will repress what scares you. So it'll give you the necessary information. It'll say, order toilet paper and paper towels and food, and I ordered these grow things for lettuce. I didn't realize why until the supply chain stopped, but I'd ordered these great, indoor grow things, and I had fresh lettuce. But you'll find yourself doing things without knowing why you're doing them, but they're not frightening things. I always say, if you think intuition is telling you to jump off a bridge, I would call someone about that one. Don't want to, you want to stay with, what doesn't have a downside. So I helped restructure a lot of companies and a lot of communities, and they in turn really helped, because everything's synchronicity, helped give me a wonderful new career online, which I didn't have before. I didn't even know how to use Twitter or whatever, Instagram. I didn't even know how to, I used my computer as a typewriter. So, now that I'm married to a man who has to run a show in a different country every 6 months, it gave me something as well.
Oh, and then if anyone thinks, look at your bio, for example, you've written a book, Welcome to Your Crisis. And, it almost sounds like someone who knows that something is going to go wrong. And I know you wrote this book a long time ago, but welcome to your crisis, how to use the power of crisis to create the life you want. Laura, I have to ask you, we're in a crisis right now. We call it pandemic, whatever we call it. How can we utilize the power of this pandemic to create the life that we want?
So although there are 4 reaction styles, we all react with one of them to crisis. And it's the same one we had when we were 3 years old, when we were little tiny kids. But one thing is true of crisis, which is we spend most of our lives and most of our energy holding on tightly to what is. And what crisis does painfully often is it takes what is and it smashes it. And some of us still try to hold on, but that is not a very good bet. So what crisis does is it says, okay, the tidal wave has swept away your furniture, your home, maybe even part of your family. This is what you're left with. And all of a sudden, you notice that in not holding on, you can make changes. There have been, during the pandemic, so many people are getting out of dead-end jobs, are changing careers, getting out of marriages that didn't work. We are, seeing that in many ways our society has not been serving us. The crisis isn't the pandemic. The crisis was everything that we see clearly now wasn't working before. So crisis does offer opportunity. And the reality is, it's Pollyanna-ish to say, oh, every loss has a silver lining. Loss is awful. Change is hard for all of us. It is our job, though, if we want to have adaptive, successful lives, to find the can-do in the what is. So, and crisis, in a sense, really does make that easy, because what's gone is already lost. So if you can just say, okay, this actually is gone. Let me work on self. How can I respond adaptively?
And that brings my question to the anxious people having anxiety, people being not sure about tomorrow. How do you offer support? What kind of support do you give to people using intuition to understand that this is just a process you're going through?
So on Instagram, every morning, I train professional intuitives. I've worked for the same companies for 30 years. I read my students, but I don't take clients. So I train intuitives. So every morning on Instagram, one of the ways we help is we predict the future so that people can prepare. It is so helpful to have a sense of the future, to be able to make the right decisions now. So that is one way. The other way is to really show people, like, this is no more of a crisis than any other moment in time, really. It's a little more global in its voice. We're all having the same kind of crisis, although we're living it differently. But it's, most of our population is in crisis most of the time. So one of the things we do is say, okay, when there is a crisis, you can react, which usually makes more problems. You can interact, which gives you power. And once again, we get together every morning to predict. You can be proactive. So a rage type in crisis blames, strikes out, and makes more problems. An anxiety type usually freezes, obsesses, and deals with a problem that will never happen when the real problems go undealt with. A denial type, goes shopping when there's a financial crisis and pretends it's not there, but ultimately you do have to deal with reality. And a depression type tends to sink and do nothing. And so more and more piles up upon them. So one of the things that I do is I help people, and our group, when I say I'm talking about our group, because now our group really is a group of teachers. We're all teaching the same work. So we predict the future, we inform ourselves about our crisis types, and we work from our strengths. So an anxiety type has a great deal of awareness. They can find the solution really easily. They are the person who says, why are you walking into this wall? There's a path right here that nobody else sees. The depression type has the depth and the intelligence to find the purpose in it so that you can be the front runner. You can be the person who actually knows there's going to be a demand for masks before there is one and creates them. The rage type, who would have, blown up, if you can help them channel that and discharge some of that energy, they're the people who can find the factory. Their gift is passion. They have so much energy. They can get things done. And the denial type is the one who, while we're all saying, oh my God, that could happen and this could happen, could say, this is what's happening, let's do this. They're effective. So when we have a community, which we do, what happens is all the types can help each other function productively. The depression type can say, okay, here's what you need to create. The anxiety type can say, oh, here's the path to creating it. The denial type can say, forget about the packaging. The product is fine. We can put that in a burlap bag. They're the effective ones. And I've forgotten one of the types: depression, anxiety. And the rage type can get it on the market. They have when we're all exhausted and falling asleep, they still have energy and passion to spare. They're the people who bring it all together. Yes, we all need to do this. They have the energy to motivate us all. So what we do in a group, using prediction, so in a sense, solving these problems before they happen, what we do in a group is we also manage our individual types. And we have a wonderful way of communicating, because one of the things that happens when you train in intuition is you are able to hear the world around you in a way that is productive. So we often hear, because we don't realize it, but we're looking for, oh, does this person judge me? Does this person blah, blah, blah? You don't need to hear that. That's their problem. What you need to hear is, oh, this person is looking for this and I know how to do that, and they're willing to pay a couple £100,000 a year for it. And they live, you need to be able to hear the data that allows you to move effectively in your world. And we all get very bogged down because everyone's intuitive. So we get very bogged down with what we're listening for. Ask yourself, what are you listening for? Do you really care what Joe Schmo thinks of the jacket you're wearing? Is that really where your attention wants to go? Or do you want your attention to go to the next opportunity, the next hot relationship you can have, the next market movement, the next, and so a lot of it, we work with a process called the circle, and a lot of it is, and ask yourself this now, in this moment, and it doesn't have to be lofty, maybe it's getting a new car. What's your goal? What is your goal in this moment? And then one of the things that intuition teaches us is it's great to be mindful, because you can only make change in this moment. So being mindful, which is not being meditative, being mindful means the good and the bad, what you're experiencing, what's around you, be mindful. But now with those same senses that allow you to experience the moment, don't look for it, don't create, allow yourself to experience what you want as well. And what you notice is that you shift your telepathy, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, things begin to happen for you. That's not magic. it is energetic dynamics. There's a mathematical formula somewhere for it.
And that's honestly, that is a right way to cure anxiety, that rather than sitting there and saying that something's happening, I think this is the right way to deal with your anxiety, deal with whatever the world is throwing at us. My final question to you before I let you go, can you give us one of your favorite life lesson quotes that you believe we should use in 2022?
Favorite life
Lesson. Or you could give us your own. What life lesson quote would
one
you
of my
utilize?
favorite, and I think one of my favorite is by Ram Dass, who was a nice Jewish boy who then found India and became Ram Dass. And his quote is, "The pain of birth is the pain of death, and the pain of death is the pain of birth." And that really, in my 20s, changed my life, because I thought to myself, okay, I'm in a loss here. I've lost something. It may be little, and maybe I stained my favorite sweater, but I've lost something. Every moment has loss, and every loss prepares us for a birth. So where is the birth? How do I find the birth in every loss? And it does demand of us a very important skill. And we have lost that skill in our culture, which is the ability to mourn, the ability to say, yes, I have lost this. I did value it. Even if it's some bum who left you, you valued the bum enough to be with them in the first place.
Absolutely.
The loss. So I am a wonderful being because I am capable of the act of valuing. I have lost this, but in every loss, there's a birth. So where is the birth?
Oh, I have never thought about it like that. In every loss, there's a birth. Thank you so much for sharing that amazing quote. I'm sure we'll be utilizing it for 2022. Laura Day, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.